Sometimes I wonder if everything would have been different if my dad hadn't died that spring morning. I was only 6. But I remember it like it was yesterday. Dad was making pancakes, his Sunday special. He always shaped them into funny faces that made me giggle. Mom was setting the table, humming some tune. I can't remember anymore. Lily Princess. Come, help your old man flip these masterpieces, Dad called out, waving his spatula like a magic wand. I jumped off the couch, leaving my favorite stuffed bunny behind, and ran to the kitchen. That's when it happened. The spatula clattered to the floor, and Dad clutched his chest. His face twisted in pain. Everything after that is a blur of ambulance sirens, hospital corridors, and Mom crying. Just like that, my father was gone, leaving behind an empty house that felt too big and too quiet. Mom didn't cry for long, though. She met Richard at some community support group for widowed parents. He seemed nice enough, tall with kind eyes and a gentle smile that reminded me a bit of Dad. Within a year, they were married, and he moved into our house. I was trying to adjust to having a new father figure when Mom dropped another bombshell: she was pregnant. I remember her face glowing with excitement as she told me I was going to be a big sister. I was 8 when Tommy was born, and that's when everything changed. That's when Mom quit her job as an elementary school teacher. "Tommy meets me," she'd say, whenever anyone questioned her decision. These early years are crucial for a child's development. I wanted to ask about my early years, about whether they hadn't been crucial, too. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I watched as Mom's world gradually shrank until it revolved entirely around Tommy. She'd forget to pack my lunch for school, then act surprised when I mentioned being hungry at dinner. "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetie," she'd say distractedly, already turning back to Tommy. I was so busy with Tommy's doctor's appointment today. It wasn't just once or twice. It became our new normal. Richard noticed I'd catch him watching Mom with a worried frown as she fussed over Tommy, completely ignoring me at the dinner table. One evening, as I sat alone doing my homework, he sat down beside me. "You know, Lily," he said quietly, helping me with my math problems. "Sometimes people get so caught up in one thing that they forget to see what else they might be missing." As Tommy grew older, the tension in our house became impossible to ignore. Richard tried talking to Mom countless times about her obsession with Tommy, but it always ended the same way, with Mom getting defensive and angry. I remember one particular evening when Richard brought it up during dinner. Tommy was about 5, pushing his food around his plate while Mom hovered over him, trying to convince him to eat just one more bite. "Sarah," Richard said, putting down his fork, "we need to talk about this. You can't keep hovering over him like this. He needs to learn to do things on his own." Mom's face immediately hardened. "What are you trying to say? That I'm a bad mother?" "That's not what I meant. And you know it," Richard replied, keeping his voice calm. "But you've got 2 kids here. Not 1. And a husband, too. By the way, I pretended to be very interested in my mashed potatoes, but I was hanging on every word. Tommy needs me." Mom snapped. "He's still so young." I was young too, I muttered under my breath. But nobody seemed to hear me. The situation came to a head when Richard suggested enrolling Tommy in Little League Baseball. I was sitting on the stairs, supposedly doing my homework, when I heard them arguing in the kitchen. "Absolutely not." Mom's voice was shrill. "Do you know how dangerous baseball can be? He could get hit by the ball or twist his ankle or... For God's sake, Sarah," He needs to experience life. You can't protect him from everything." But Mom wouldn't budge. Instead, she enrolled Tommy in art classes at the community center. I still remember Tommy's sullen face as he sat there, mindlessly dragging his brush across paper while other kids actually tried to learn. He quit after 3 sessions. And Mom blamed the teacher for not understanding her son's creative spirit. Meanwhile, Richard started spending more time with me. Maybe it was his way of balancing out Mom's behavior. Or maybe he just saw a kid who needed someone in her corner. He'd take me to my karate classes 3 times a week, sitting through every session, cheering louder than any other parent when I earned my belts. But while I was flourishing under Richard's attention, Tommy was becoming increasingly difficult. He'd leave his room a complete mess, toys and clothes everywhere, and Mom would turn to me with that look I'd come to dread. "Lily, be a dear and clean up Tommy's room," she'd say, not really asking, but telling. One day, Richard caught wind of this arrangement. "She's not as maid, Sarah," he protested. "He needs to learn to clean up after himself." That's when Mom burst into tears, pulling out her ultimate weapon. "I knew it. You love her more than your own son. How can you treat Tommy this way?" I watched Richard's face fall, saw the fight leave his eyes. He looked at me apologetically, then raised his hands in surrender. "Fine, have it your way," he said quietly, walking away. After that, he stopped arguing with Mom about Tommy. But the look he gave me said everything. He hadn't given up on me. Even if he'd given up on fighting with Mom, it was a small comfort. But sometimes, small comforts are all we have. High school graduation day was bittersweet. As I stood in my cap and gown scanning the crowd, I spotted Richard beaming proudly. Mom was there too, but she kept checking her phone, probably texting Tommy's babysitter. Later that evening, Richard called me into his study. "I've been saving up," he said, pulling out a folder full of college brochures. "You can go wherever you want, Lily. Sky's the limit." Before I could respond, Mom burst in. "You can't be serious," she exclaimed. "That money should be saved for Tommy's future. He's going to need it more." Richard's face hardened, an expression I'd grown familiar with during these confrontations. "This is non-negotiable. Sarah, I've already made my decision." I ended up choosing Marshall University in West Virginia, far enough to start fresh, but not so far that I couldn't visit occasionally. The day Richard helped me move into my dorm, Mom couldn't come because Tommy had anxiety about her leaving college. Life was exactly what I needed. For the first time, I felt free from the shadow of being the less favored child. I called home weekly, but my conversations were mostly with Richard. Mom was always too busy with Tommy. "Your brother's going through a difficult phase," Richard explained during one of our calls. His voice sounded tired. "He's hanging out with these kids from the wrong side of the tracks. I tried getting him involved in some after-school programs, but your mother let me guess." I interrupted. "She said you were being too hard on him." "Exactly. He called me a tyrant for suggesting he might need some structure." Richard sighed. "She says, I don't understand how sensitive he is." My visits home became less frequent as Tommy's behavior worsened. When I did come, he barely acknowledged my existence, holed up in his room with his video games. The few times I caught glimpses of him, he looked pale and angry, his eyes glued to various screens. After graduation, I landed a job at Deloitte in their consulting division. I stayed in West Virginia, building my career while watching from afar as my brother descended further into his self-imposed isolation. During one of my rare visits home, I tried knocking on his door. "Tommy, wanna grab lunch?" My treat. All I got in response was the sound of gunfire from whatever game he was playing. Mom, passing by in the hallway, just shrugged. "He's not feeling social today. He's very stressed." You know, the contrast between our lives couldn't have been starker. While I was pursuing my career goals, Tommy was pursuing virtual achievements supported by Mom's endless excuses. Richard's disappointed face said it all. But by then, even he had largely given up on trying to intervene. By 27, I had finally saved enough for a down payment on my own place. It wasn't huge. Just a one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. But it was mine. The day I got the keys, I couldn't stop smiling. All those years of saving a brown bag lunches and saying no to designer clothes had finally paid off. "You all have to come see it," I said during my weekly call home. "I'm having a housewarming party next Saturday. I'll cook dinner." "Richard, I'm even making your favorite lasagna. Wouldn't miss it for the world." "Kiddo," Richard replied warmly. Mom's voice cut in on the other line. "Oh, honey, I don't think we can make it. Tommy has plans that day." Plans. I couldn't keep the skepticism out of my voice. "What kind of plans?" "Very important ones," Mom said vaguely. I could hear Tommy's video game blasting in the background. The day of the housewarming, only Richard showed up. He brought a potted plant and a bottle of wine. "Your mother sends her love," he said, but we both knew that was a lie. Over dinner, Richard filled me in on what was really happening at home. Tommy, now 20, hadn't bothered with college and spent his days either gaming or hanging out with his drinking buddies. Richard had tried to help, offering him a position at his construction company just as a starting point. "You know," Richard explained, twirling pasta on his fork, "everyone needs to start somewhere." "But Sarah," he shook his head. "Sarah said it would be beneath him." Can you believe that Saeed, our Tommy, was too intelligent for manual labor? Too intelligent to work, but not too intelligent to mooch off his parents. I muttered. Richard gave me a sad smile. "I keep trying, Lily. God knows I keep trying." That was the last real conversation we had. 2 years later, I got the call that changed everything. Richard had collapsed at work. Massive heart attack. Just like my father. By the time I made it to the hospital, he was gone. The funeral was surreal. Mum put on quite a show, sobbing dramatically and telling anyone who would listen what a wonderful husband Richard had been. "We were so happy," she wailed. "How will we manage without him?" I watched her performance with a mix of disgust and pity. Her tears weren't for Richard. They were for herself. I could see the wheels turning behind her grief-stricken facade. Richard had been the sole breadwinner. Without his income, how would she maintain Tommy and the lifestyle to which he'd become accustomed? Tommy didn't even bother to wear a proper suit to the funeral. He showed up in wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt that had seen better days. He spent most of the service staring at his phone while Mom made excuses for him. He's processing his grief in his own way. Standing there at Richard's grave, I couldn't help but think about how history had repeated itself. Another father figure, another heart attack, another funeral. Only this time I was old enough to see everything clearly, including the fact that Mom's tears were more about her bank account than her broken heart. A year after Richard's death, I had mostly lost touch with Mom and Tommy. What little I knew came from Aunt Linda's occasional calls. "They're getting by on Richard's savings," she told me. "Your mom sold his Chevrolet last month. The tools from his workshop went before that." I tried not to care. I really did. But when Mom's number flashed on my phone one Tuesday evening, my heart still skipped a beat. "Lily." Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "I need you to come home. Please." Something in her tone made me book a flight for the next day. When I pulled up to our old house, I barely recognized the place. The once pristine lawn Richard had meticulously maintained was overgrown with weeds, paint peeled from the window frames, and one of the shutters hung crooked. But the house wasn't the only thing that had aged poorly. Mom opened the door, and I had to suppress a gasp. The vibrant woman I remembered had been replaced by someone who looked 20 years older than her actual age. Deep wrinkles lined her face and her hair, which she'd always kept perfectly colored and styled, showed stark gray roots. "Come in," she said, leading me into the living room. The house smelled musty, and dishes were piled in the sink. A thin layer of dust covered everything. This from the woman who used to make me rewash plates. If she spotted a single water spot, "Mom, what's going on?" I asked. Settling onto the couch, a spring dug into my thigh. Another thing Richard would have fixed immediately. She broke down almost immediately. "We're running out of money. Lily, my pension barely covers the utilities and the savings." She twisted her hands in her lap. "They're almost gone." "What about Tommy? Is he helping with expenses?" Mom's face did this complicated dance between embarrassment and defensiveness. "He's looking for work. It's not his fault. These employers, they just don't understand him. The last place wanted him to start at 8 a.m. You know, Tommy's not a morning person. And the one before that expected him to do manual labor with his intelligence." I felt my jaw tightening. Mom, at his age, and with no experience, he can't exactly be picky about. "You don't understand." She cut me off, her voice rising to that familiar pitch that always preceded a Tommy defense. Then, abruptly, her tone changed. "Lily, we need your help. We won't survive without it. I hate to ask, but you're doing so well in your career." I knew what was coming. Part of me wanted to refuse to remind her of all the time she'd chosen Tommy over me. But looking at her worn face, the trembling hands, the desperate eyes, I couldn't. "How much do you need?" When she said $1. $500 per month. I nearly choked. That was a significant chunk of my salary. But I found myself nodding anyway. "Where's Tommy now?" I asked as I prepared to leave, already regretting my decision. "Oh, he's at a job interview." Mom brightened slightly. "A very promising position with a tech company through the window." I could see Tommy's bedroom light on, and the familiar flicker of his computer screen. Some things never changed. True to my word, I set up an automatic transfer of $1, $500 to Mom's account every month. Each time I saw that deduction from my bank balance, I told myself it was the right thing to do. Even if it meant postponing my own plans for a bigger apartment or a new car, I started visiting more frequently. Though each visit felt like walking into a time capsule, Tommy was always there. Either glued to his computer screen or sprawled on the couch with a beer in hand. "How's the job search going?" I'd ask. "Mind your own business." He'd snap. Or sometimes just grunt and turn up the volume on his game. During the holidays, I couldn't stand seeing the living room in such disrepair. The wallpaper was peeling, and there was a water stain on the ceiling that would have driven Richard crazy. So I spent my Christmas bonus hiring contractors to fix it up. When Mom sprained her ankle in February, I called to check on her. "Oh, it's not so bad," she said, though I could hear the pain in her voice. "Is Tommy helping you? He's busy with some online interviews." I hired a home health aide the next day. The money I'd been saving for a vacation went to cover her wages for the next 3 weeks. Then came the day I walked into the house and found a stranger sprawled across our sofa. She looked like she'd stepped out of a reality television show. Fake nails that could double as weapons. Heavy makeup and clothes that left little to the imagination. She was scrolling to her phone, surrounded by empty chip bags and soda cans. "Who are you?" I asked. Though I had a sinking feeling, I knew the answer. Tommy emerged from his room. "This is Candy," he announced. "My fiancée. She lives here now." Candy didn't even look up from her phone, just popped her gum loudly. I watched in disbelief as she reached into the grocery bag I just brought and helped herself to the premium cookies I bought for Mom. "Nice to meet you too," I muttered under my breath. Later that evening, I called Mom to get her take on the situation. "Oh, Lily." She sounded more animated than I'd heard her in months. "Isn't it wonderful? Tommy's finally settling down. Candy's been such a good influence on him. He hasn't gone out drinking with those awful friends in weeks. That's because she's drinking all my imported beer at home," I thought, remembering the empty bottles I'd spotted in the recycling bin. But I held my tongue. "And he's talking about getting a job." Mom continued excitedly. "Candy's cousin knows someone at a tech startup. Tommy says it could be his big break." I made non-committal noises while thinking about the dozens of big breaks Tommy had mentioned over the years. But Mom was so happy living in her bubble of perpetual hope that I didn't have the heart to burst. My next visit home started like any other. I juggled grocery bags as I pushed open the front door, only to stop dead in my tracks. The house looked like a tornado had torn through it. Dirty dishes piled high in the sink. Takeout containers scattered across every surface. And clothes strewn about the living room floor. Candy lay sprawled on the couch, perfectly manicured. Nails tapping away at her phone screen. She didn't even look up as I sat down the groceries. "You know," I said, my voice sharp. "You live here, rent-free eating food that I pay for. The least you could do is wash a dish or two." She looked up slowly, a smirk playing across her heavily glossed lips. "Who do you think you are to come in here giving orders? This isn't your house." "I grew up here," I shot back. "You're just a guest." That's when she laughed. A harsh, triumphant sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, honey, you've got it all wrong. This house belongs to Tommy now. Your mom signed everything over to him. There's a will and everything." I found Mom in the kitchen organizing coupons she never used. "Is it true?" My voice sounded strange in my own ears. "Did you make a while?" Leaving everything to Tommy, she wouldn't meet my eyes at first, fiddling with the papers in front of her. Then something seemed to harden in her expression. "Yes," she said flatly. "It's true. I don't understand." The words came out barely above a whisper. "I'm the one helping you. I'm the one sending money every month. Tommy doesn't work. Doesn't contribute anything. Don't you dare talk about your brother that way." Mom's voice rose sharply. "You don't understand him. You never have." "Understand what? That he's a parasite. That he's perfectly content to live off my money while his girlfriend trashes our home." "Oh, Stop being so dramatic. Mom's face twisted into something I didn't recognize. You want to know the truth? I never loved you the way I love Tommy. He's better than you in every way that matters. And I don't want to see you here anymore. The words hit like physical blows. All these years, I told myself that Mom did love me. She just showed it differently. That summer, beneath her obsession with Tommy, she cared about me too. Now I knew better. I turned and walked out, Candy's triumphant laughter following me down the hall. 21 years of hoping, of making excuses, of trying to earn my mother's love. All of it ended with the quiet click of a door closing behind me. The drive home from Mom's house was a blur. I don't remember the 4-hour trip. I'll remember climbing the stairs to my apartment. I don't even remember sitting down on my couch. But I do remember the moment of clarity that came as I stared at my phone, spanking up the automatic transfer to Mom's account. $500 every month for the past year. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment before I decisively clicked. Cancel recurring payment for the next few weeks? I threw myself into work trying to ignore the hole in my budget that suddenly felt like an opportunity rather than a burden. I started researching investment options for the money I'd been sending home. Maybe I could finally start saving for a house of my own. A real house. Not just an apartment. Then, exactly 1 month after my last visit home, Mom called. The money didn't come through, she said without preamble. No. Hello, no. How are you? There must be some mistake with the bank. There's no mistake, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice was. I canceled the transfers. There was a moment of stunned silence before she exploded. You, what? How dare you? After everything that I've done for you. I actually laughed at that. Everything you've done for me. Like what, Mom forgetting my existence, forcing me to be Tommy's maid, telling me you never loved me. That's different. She was using her familiar Tommy defense voice. You know, I was upset. But you can't just stop helping us. We're counting on that money. Tommy and Candy are planning a vacation to Cancun. They need a vacation. I interrupted my voice, raising. Tommy needs a vacation. From what exactly? Playing video games. Drinking beer. Let me tell you something. Mom, Tommy doesn't need a vacation. He needs a job. How dare you speak about your brother that way? You're just jealous because... Because what? Because you left everything to him. Fine. You made your choice. Now he can take care of you. You ungrateful mercenary little. The rest of her tirade dissolved into a stream of accusations and demands. I let her rant for a moment before speaking again. Goodbye. Mom, don't call me again. I blocked her number before she could respond. But Mom wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, the messages started pouring in through every possible channel. Facebook messages about how she was struggling to pay bills. Instagram comments about what a terrible daughter I was. Emails detailing all the sacrifices she'd made for me, most of which I couldn't remember actually happening. Tommy joined in too, sending aggressive texts about how I was destroying the family. Mom's crying because of you, he wrote. You better start sending money again, or else. I blocked him too. But not before replying. Here's a crazy idea. Try getting a job. Candy even tried reaching out through LinkedIn of all places, with a long message about how I was breaking my poor mother's heart and how Tommy was too sensitive to handle the stress of work right now. I had to admire her creativity at least. It's been 6 months now. I don't know how they're doing. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel guilty about that. Maybe they finally realized that Tommy needs to support himself. Maybe they're still waiting for me to cave in and start sending money again. Maybe they found someone else to manipulate. The truth is, I don't need to know. What I do know is that the $1, $500, I used to send them every month has gone into a down payment fund for my own house. I know that I sleep better at night. No longer awakened by angry messages or guilt-tripping calls. I know that Richard would be proud of me for finally standing up for myself. The other day, I drove past a construction site and saw a nail hiring sign for a moment. I thought about taking a picture and sending it to Tommy. But then I just smiled and kept driving. Their problems aren't my problems anymore. Finally, after all these years, I'm free. My name is Ashley. And at 32, I've spent the last decade building my career as a manager at Preston & Associates. While my younger sisters Sarah and Emma were busy starting their families, I was climbing the corporate ladder. Don't get me wrong. I love my job. But sometimes I wonder if I missed out on something along the way. No husband. No kids. Just me in my corner office with a view of the city. It was a regular Tuesday morning when my phone rang. Sarah's name flashed across the screen and I answered while sorting through a stack of reports on my desk. "Hey, Ash," Sarah's voice chirped through the speaker. At 26, my youngest sister had always been the bubbly one. "Got a minute?" "Sure." "What's up?" I shuffled some papers aside, half listening as I reviewed quarterly numbers. "So, you know, Mom's turning 60 in 2 months." "Right." She paused for a fact. "Well, we're planning something special, and we need everyone to chip in." That got my attention. "Okay, how much are we talking about?" When Sarah named the figure, I nearly choked on my coffee. It was more than I'd spent on my last vacation. Which, come to think of it, was 3 years ago. "I know it's a lot," Sarah rushed to add. "But it's for Mom. You know." No. "It's fine," I said, already pulling up my banking app. "I'll transfer it right now." "Great." "Oh, and one more thing. Make sure you take a week off work for the celebration. Don't plan anything else for that time." Okay. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of meetings and deadlines. I'd occasionally wonder what my sisters were planning with all that money. But whenever I asked, they'd brushed me off with vague responses. Eventually, work took over, and Mom's birthday slipped to the back of my mind. Then came the Saturday dinner. We all gathered at our parents' house. Mom and Dad, my sisters and Susan and her kids, my cousins Michael and Rachel. The familiar chaos of family dinners surrounded us. Dad telling his same old jokes. Mom fussing over everyone's plates. The usual stuff. That's when Sarah dropped her bomb. "So," she said, pushing her piece around her plate with calculated casualness, "we finally got everything arranged for Mom's birthday. We're all going to spend a week at Mountain Pine Resort." The table erupted in excited chatter. Mom was beaming. Dad was already talking about hitting the slopes. And my sisters were discussing which ski runs they wanted to try. "Why didn't anyone tell me earlier?" I asked, feeling a bit left out. I don't even have a ski suit, and there's barely any time to get one now. The table got quiet. Too quiet. Mom cleared her throat, and I felt my stomach drop before she even opened her mouth. "Actually, honey," she said with that tone she used when she was about to ask for a favor. She knew I couldn't refuse. "We were hoping you could do us all a huge favor and watch the kids while we're there." I stared at my family. gathered around the dinner table, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was all a joke. But the silence stretched on, broken only by the soft clink of silverware against plates. "You want me to watch the kids?" I finally managed to say. "All 5 of them." My mind started counting them off automatically. Emma's toddler Jason, Sarah's baby girl Lucy, cousin Michael's twins Tom and Anna, and Rachel's son Pete. 5 kids under the age of 7. "Well, you're so good with them," Mom said, as if that explained everything. "They love their Aunt Ashley." I looked around the table again, still hoping to see a hint of humor in someone's eyes. There was none. Just expectant faces waiting for my usual yes. "But that's not fair," I heard myself say. "My boy," sounding strange to my own ears. "I want to celebrate with everyone, too. It's Mom's birthday." Emma, my 28-year-old sister, put down her fork with a sigh. "Come on, Ashley. You'll be bored there anyway. It's going to be noisy and crowded." "Bored," I repeated. "How would you know if I'd be bored?" "Well," she continued, exchanging glances with Sarah, "you're great with the kids. They adore you. And let's be honest, it's not like you need a break from family life." I felt my chest tighten. "What's that supposed to mean?" Sarah jumped in, her voice carrying that condescending tone she'd perfected over the years. "She just means that you don't have children or a husband to get away from the rest of us. We need this break. You understand, right?" The green beams on my plate blurred as I blinked back tears. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Instead, I quietly pushed back my chair and stood up. Ashley Mom's voice held a note of concern, but not enough to actually stop me without a word. I grabbed my purse from the counter and headed for the door. Nobody moved to stop me. Nobody called out. The only sound that followed me was Mom's voice drifting from the dining room. "Don't worry. She'll be a little offended at first, but she'll come around. She always does." As I walked to my car, their voices faded behind me, already moving on to discussing ski slopes and winter gear. The evening air was crisp against my face, helping to clear my head. 10 years of putting everyone else first, of being the responsible one, the reliable one. And this is what I got in return. The worst part wasn't even the babysitting request. It was the casualness with which they'd assumed I'd agree the way they'd planned. This whole thing, without me using my money, my time, my vacation days, without even asking, as if I was just a resource to be used, not a member of the family to be included. I spent half the night pacing around my apartment, replaying every family dinner, every holiday, every moment when I dropped everything to help someone else. The memories came flooding back, each one taking on a new, darker meaning. In light of tonight's events, there I was at 16, making dinner while Mom helped Emma with her homework. Me, at 18, turning down a spring break trip with friends to watch Sarah while our parents took a weekend getaway at 21. Working 2 jobs during college to help pay for Emma's prom dress. The images kept coming year after year. Sacrifice after sacrifice. "Ashley, can you watch Jason for a few hours?" Emma's voice echoed in my head. "I really need a break." "Ashley, would you mind taking the twins for the weekend?" Michael's familiar request played back like a broken record. Rachel's overwhelmed with Pete. "And you're so good with kids." I'd always said yes. Always. Even when I had important meetings the next day. Even when I was exhausted from my own work week. I'd taken pride in being the reliable one, the responsible sister, the perfect daughter. I collapsed onto my couch, the leather coal against my skin. The photo albums on my coffee table caught my eye. Family vacations where I was always the one behind the camera. Holiday gatherings where I was always in the kitchen while everyone else laughed in the living room. When was the last time someone had asked me what I wanted? It's not like you need a break from family life. Sarah's words kept echoing in my head as if my life, my career, my choices were somehow less valid because I wasn't married with children. As if all my sacrifices meant nothing because they didn't fit their definition of what mattered. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, remembering how I'd worked through college on a scholarship, determined not to burden my parents financially. How I'd started my career immediately after graduation, helping to put both my sisters through school. All those late nights at the office, climbing the corporate ladder, sending chunks of my salary home to help with family expenses. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't a confrontational person. Never had been. There had to be a way to resolve this peacefully, to make them understand without causing a family rift. So I did what I'd always done. When there was a problem, I tried to fix it. I waited until a reasonable hour on Sunday morning before picking up my phone. Mom answered on the third ring. "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've been thinking about the resort trip. Actually, I have a solution. I'll pay for a professional babysitter for all 5 kids. That way everyone can enjoy the celebration together." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a moment too long. "That will work. Ashley," Mom finally said, her voice tight. "We can't trust some stranger with the children. They're used to you." "Mom, I want to be part of the celebration too." I tried to explain. "I want to be there for your birthday. I could find a really good babysitter. Someone with excellent references. You know, you're not exactly a social butterfly." She cut me off, her voice sharp. "You'd probably be uncomfortable with all the noise and activity anyway. The children will keep you busy, and you enjoy spending time with them. It's perfect for everyone." The click of the call ending echoed in my ear before I could respond. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear as my mother's words sank in. She hadn't even bothered to say goodbye. I was still staring at my phone, processing my mother's abrupt hang-up when it buzzed again. Sarah's name flashed across the screen. "How dare you?" she hissed, before I could even say hello. "Mom just told me about your little suggestion about hiring a babysitter. Are you trying to ruin everything?" I sat up straighter, my sister's hostile tone catching me off guard. "Ruined everything. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. We already have a solution." Sarah's voice rose. "Everything's planned. Ashley, everything. And now you're being completely selfish, trying to change all our arrangements at the last minute." The accusation hit me like a slap. "I'm being selfish?" "Yes, you are. We've been planning this for weeks. Everyone's excited. The resort is booked. The activities are scheduled. And now you want to throw a wrench in everything. Because you can't just do this one thing for the family." My hands started shaking. "One thing. Are you serious? You know what? If you ruin this trip for everyone, if you spoil Mom's birthday celebration, don't bother talking to me again. I mean it." "Ashley." The line went dead. I sat there stunned by my baby sister's threat when my phone buzzed with incoming messages. This time from Emma. "Family needs to stick together." Her first text read, "We all help each other out." Another message popped up. "Remember when I watered your flowers last year while you were at that conference? And another? You're good with the kids. They love you. Why can't you just forget about being resentful and think about what's best for the family? My fingers flew across the keyboard as I replied. A real family doesn't take advantage of each other. A real family respects each other's wishes and includes everyone in their plans. A real family doesn't manipulate and guilt-trip each other. I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear several times. But no response came. That's when it hit me the way they'd asked for money without explaining what it was for. The careful way they'd told me to take time off work without mentioning the resort. The casual way they'd announced their plans at dinner as if everything was already set in stone. They'd planned this all along while I was working late nights. While I was babysitting their kids. While I was being the perfect daughter and sister, they were secretly arranging this trip. They'd used my money, arranged my schedule, and planned to dump 5 children on me without so much as a conversation. And now that I wasn't playing along with their script, they were trying every manipulation tactic they could think of: guilt, threats, emotional blackmail to force me back into the box they'd created for me. Something strange happens when you finally see through the fog of manipulation. Suddenly, everything becomes crystal clear. I felt lighter than I had in years. The guilt that had been weighing me down was replaced by something else: determination. I opened my laptop and started searching. Within an hour, I had booked a beachfront hotel in Florida. Nothing too fancy. But it had a balcony overlooking the ocean and was within walking distance to everything I might need. I even splurged on a first-class plane ticket. After all, I had plenty of money since I wouldn't be skiing. The next few days at work were surprisingly peaceful. My family had stopped calling and texting. They probably thought I was home preparing for a week of childcare. Maybe buying extra snacks and planning activities. The thought made me smile as I packed my beach clothes and new swimsuit. Taking a tropical vacation in the middle of winter. My colleague Janet asked when she saw me checking the Florida weather forecast, "Sometimes you need to do something unexpected," I replied, surprised by how good it felt to say those words out loud. The morning of my flight, I took one last look around my apartment. I'd cleaned everything meticulously. Force of habit, I suppose. The empty fridge. The properly locked windows. Everything in perfect order. Just like always, except this time, I wouldn't be here to answer any desperate phone calls for babysitting. As the plane took off, I switched off my phone and tucked it into my bag. No social media. No email. No family drama. Just me, the beach, and a whole week of freedom. The Florida air hit me like a warm embrace when I stepped out of the airport. Palm trees swayed in the breeze, and I could smell the salt from the ocean. Even from here. My hotel room was even better than the pictures. The balcony offered a perfect view of the endless blue horizon, and I could hear the waves crashing against the shore. That first afternoon, I walked barefoot on the beach, letting the warm sand squeeze between my toes. When was the last time I'd done something like this? When was the last time I'd done anything just for me? I swam in the hotel pool, read a book without interruption, and had dinner at a quiet beachside restaurant where no one needed me to cut their food or clean up their spills. I watched the sunset from my balcony, sipping a glass of wine without a single thought about bedtime routines or morning schedules. My last morning in Florida, I savored my final moments of peace. I knew I'd have to turn my phone back on eventually. I face whatever chaos I'd left behind. But I hadn't expected quite what I found when my phone finally powered up. It started buzzing non-stop messages. Voicemails. Missed calls. Hundreds of them. The timestamp showed they started exactly a week ago. early in the morning. My hands trembled slightly as I began scrolling through them. The first messages were from Sarah. "Where are you? We're outside your house." Then Emma Ashley opened the door. "The kids are getting restless." Michael. "Hey. We brought Tom and Anna. Like planned. Are you home, Rachel Ashley?" "What's going on?" Pete's asking for his aunt. As I read through the messages, I could picture the scene perfectly. My sisters and cousins standing outside my empty house with 5 confused children, their suitcases packed for the resort, their carefully laid plans crumbling around them. The tone of the messages changed quickly from confusion to panic. "Ashley, this isn't funny. Where are you? Pick up your phone. What are we supposed to do with the kids? You can't just disappear like this." Then came the anger. Sarah's messages turned nasty. "You selfish witch. How could you do this to us? Emma wasn't much better. I can't believe you're this immature. Mom's birthday is ruined because of you." My and Susan's messages made me wince. I'd never seen her use that kind of language before. "You ungrateful little. You've ruined everything. These children were counting on you." Mom's messages started later in the day. "I'm so disappointed in you. Ashley, I never thought you'd be this selfish. After everything we've done for you." Dad, who rarely texted, had sent just one message. "Your mother is crying. I hope you're happy with yourself." The voicemails were worse. I could hear the anger, the disappointment, the accusations in their voices. Messages from extended family members I hadn't talked to in months suddenly appeared, all of them condemning my behavior. "You've always been so reliable. How could you do this to your own family? Those poor children. You've ruined everything." I sat there in my peaceful hotel room, reading message after message, learning exactly what my family thought of me when I finally stopped being their convenient solution. The words they used, the names they called me, the assumptions they made about my character. It was like meeting a whole new family, one that had been hiding behind fake smiles and casual requests for favors without responding to any of them. I packed my bags and headed to the airport. It was time to go home. But I wasn't the same Ashley who had left a week ago. That Ashley might have apologized, might have felt guilty, might have tried to make it up to everyone, but that Ashley was gone. I had just finished unpacking my beach clothes when I heard the aggressive pounding on my front door before I could even reach it. I heard a key turning in the lock, the emergency key I had given my mother years ago, just in case they burst in like an angry storm. Mom leading the charge, Emma and Sarah flanking her sides, all of them red-faced and wild-eyed. The peaceful feeling I'd cultivated in Florida evaporated instantly. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Sarah screamed, stepping forward. "You ruined everything. Everything." I stood my ground, watching them unleash their fury in my living room. The same living room where I'd babysat their children countless times, where I'd canceled my own plans to accommodate their emergencies, where I'd always been the reliable one. Mike and John refused to stay with the kids. Emma spot out, referring to their husbands. They both suddenly had important business to take care of. So Sarah had to stay home with all 5 children while we went to the resort. "She missed Mom's birthday because of you. The whole trip was ruined," Mom added, her voice rising. "Nobody could enjoy themselves. All we did was talk about how you betrayed us, how you let everyone down. Your father couldn't even ski properly. He was so upset." They continued their tirade, talking over each other, each one trying to outdo the others and expressing their disappointment and anger. The more they talked, the more absurd it all seemed, until something inside me broke. But not in the way they expected. I started laughing. The sound of my laughter cut through their accusations like a knife. They stopped mid-sentence, staring at me as if I'd lost my mind. "What's so funny?" Mom demanded, her face flushing darker. What could possibly be funny about this situation? I wiped tears of laughter from my eyes. "Don't you see how ridiculous this is? Do you really not understand how absurd you all sound right now?" "Absurd," Emma sputtered. "What's absurd about you secretly planned this entire trip?" I interrupted, my laughter fading, but my voice steady. "You decided without asking me that I would watch your children. You took my money, told me to take time off work, and then just assumed I would fall in line with your plans. And now that everything fell apart because of your assumptions, you're here, calling me the villain. But you've always helped before," Mom said, her voice smaller, now confused. "You've never said no. And that's exactly the problem. I cut in because I always helped you. Started taking advantage of me. You stopped seeing me as a daughter or a sister and started seeing me as free childcare. You stopped considering my feelings, my plans, my life." "That's not true," Sarah protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Then why didn't you include me in the planning? Why didn't you ask me if I wanted to go to the resort? Why did you just assume I'd be happy to stay behind with 5 children while everyone else celebrated?" I watched their faces, hoping to see some recognition, some understanding of how they treated me. Instead, I saw their expressions harden. "You're being selfish," Mom said, her voice cold. "You've ruined my birthday. You've hurt your sisters. You've disappointed the children. This isn't how I raised you." I felt the last thread of hope snap. "No, Mom. You're the ones being selfish. This whole situation is your fault, not mine." Mom drew herself up to her full height, her face like stone. "If that's how you feel, then perhaps I don't have a daughter named Ashley anymore. If that's what you want, Mom," I said quietly, "then so be it." It's been 6 weeks since that final confrontation in my living room. 6 weeks of silence, broken only by the occasional notification when one of my family members makes another thinly veiled post on social media. "Some people only think about themselves," Mom wrote last week, followed by a dozen sympathetic comments from relatives and family friends who only know her version of the story. Family should always come first. Sarah posted yesterday with a photo of her daughter. "So blessed to have people in my life who understand what that really means." Emma's latest was a long paragraph about toxic people who destroy family bonds with their selfishness. She didn't tag me, of course, but everyone knew who she was talking about. A few months ago, these posts would have devastated me. I would have spent hours crafting responses in my head, losing sleep over their words, wondering if maybe they were right. But now I just scroll past them, sometimes with a small smile at how predictable they've become. I've changed my routine. Instead of spending my weekends on standby for emergency babysitting calls, I've joined a local book club. The first meeting felt strange, sitting in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning, knowing my phone wouldn't ring, with a desperate plea from one of my sisters. Last week, I booked another vacation, a trip to Europe in the spring. I didn't have to check with anyone, schedule, or make sure it wouldn't conflict with someone else's needs. I just saw a good deal and took it. Sometimes in quiet moments, I think about my nieces and nephews. I miss them, but not the way they were used as weapons against me. I hope that someday when they're older, they'll understand. Maybe they'll even recognize the same patterns in their own lives and choose differently. I still have the emergency key Mom used that last day. I should probably mail it back. But something stops me each time I think about it. Maybe part of me hopes that one day they'll understand, that they'll see how their actions and expectations were unfair, how they took advantage of my love for them, that they'll realize family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to meet everyone else's needs. But I'm not waiting for that day anymore. I'm not putting my life on hold, hoping for their approval or understanding. For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. And it feels right. Yesterday, I deleted the family group chat from my phone. I didn't make an announcement about it or try to explain myself. I just quietly removed myself from one more obligation, one more source of stress. Some might call this selfishness. My family certainly does. But I've learned that there's a difference between being selfish and having self-respect. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is step away from people who can't see your worth beyond what you can do for them.